That night, I went to bed with a rare sense of calm in the old wooden house, which was built and mended by my late husband Cody, who had passed just months ago. My daughter Lena had stopped by earlier with soup and soft words. For a moment, I let myself believe the grief of losing him might finally loosen its grip. But at 4 a.m., I woke to the floodlight flaring in the backyard. I followed the noise. At the window, my breath fogged the glass as I stared into the night. And then I saw her. Lena, my child, my own daughter, kneeling in the frozen earth, bearing a box beneath the plum tree Cody had planted. My chest hollowed. What is she doing? Why there? Why bury anything at all? What secret could my daughter possibly want to hide beneath her father's tree? I am Margaret Parker, 63, a widow in Montana. And that was the moment I realized what Lena was burying in the earth was nothing compared to what she was burying from me. Subscribe if you like this kind of story. 8 months ago, everything went silent. My husband Cody passed in his sleep on a Monday morning that began like any other. One moment, I was pouring his coffee. Next, I was dialing 911 with shaking fingers, screaming into a void. The days that followed were a blur, condolence cards, casserole dishes, and funeral arrangements I barely remember approving. People came and went. But Lena stayed. She was at my side constantly, like a shadow. "Don't worry about the paperwork, Mom," she said, arms around my shoulders in the living room, still smelling of Cody's aftershave. "Let me handle it. You just rest." I didn't resist. I couldn't. Grief made everything heavy, my bones, my breath, my voice. I watched her move through the house with quiet authority, organizing documents, answering calls, sorting mail into neat little piles I wasn't allowed to touch. At first, I was grateful. She was my daughter, my only girl. She'd always been the sharp one, responsible, assertive, never one to cry easily, not like Ben, my youngest, who wore his heart on his sleeve and still called me Mama at 35. But Lena, she didn't cry at Cody's funeral, not once. A week after the service, I finally worked up the nerve to ask her gently over tea, "Lena, shouldn't we meet with the estate attorney together? I mean, I don't really understand any of that financial stuff. Maybe it's better if—" She cut me off, kind but firm. "Mom." She smiled. "I've already spoken to Mr. Langston. Everything's being handled. The accounts, the insurance, the deed. Cody and I had talked about this before he passed. He wanted things to be easy for you." That stopped me. "He talked to you?" "Of course," she said, placing her hand over mine. "He knew you'd be overwhelmed. He asked me to step in, make sure you didn't have to worry about a thing. I'm just doing what he asked." And just like that, I felt small, foolish for questioning, ungrateful even. I looked down at our hands, hers warm, steady, manicured, mine dry and veined, clenching the mug. "If that's what he wanted," I murmured. She nodded gently. "It is. You just focus on healing, okay? Let me take care of the messy stuff." From then on, I stopped asking. Or maybe I just asked quieter. Like the time I tried to log into our joint savings, and the password didn't work. "I changed it," she said casually, not looking up from her phone. "Too many phishing scams lately. I'll keep an eye on it for you." Or the time the property tax bill came in and the number looked off. "That's last year's," she said, already folding the envelope and sliding it into her bag. "I'll call the assessor's office. No need for you to worry." Little by little, I watched my own life pass from my hands into hers, and at the time, I called it love. Now, back to that night, 4 a.m. Through the kitchen window, my daughter, Lena, bearing something at the roots of Cody's plum tree. Later, I pulled on Cody's old boots, still by the door where he used to leave them. Threw on my coat, grabbed the hand shovel from the shed, and stepped into the cold. The earth was stiff, but not yet frozen solid. The spot was easy to find, the soil still loose, the leaves too neatly arranged. I dug slowly, every movement echoing in the silence. A few inches down, I found a plastic bag, tied tight, waterproof, inside it, a hard drive, and a handful of shredded documents, receipts, contracts, bank forms. Some bore the faint imprint of my signature, others were torn right through words like beneficiary and account transfer. I dropped the shovel, my knees gave out, landing me in the cold dirt. "Why?" It came out as a whisper, but it felt like a scream inside my chest. Not the cry of a mother betrayed by her child, but the silent collapse of a wife who just realized everything her husband left behind had been quietly, systematically buried by the person they trusted most. That Friday, Lena came over with a leather folder tucked under her arm. Not a purse, not her usual oversized tote. A folder, structured, intentional. She sat across from me at the dining table where Cody and I had once planned our summers. The table still bore faint watermarks from the time he'd spilled orange juice and insisted it gave the wood character. Lena placed the folder between us like a bridge, or a barrier. "I need you to sign a few things," she said. "Just formalities. It's about the accounts and property titles. Streamlining things makes it easier in the long run." I looked at her face. Calm, measured. The same voice she'd use with clients, I imagined. I tried to read her eyes, but they were already scanning the first page. "I thought the lawyer was handling all of that," I said slowly. She nodded. "He is. I'm just the go-between, so you don't have to keep making trips. These are just logistical adjustments. Dad's name needs to come off the cabin deed, and the joint account needs reclassification." She slid the first document toward me along with a pen. I picked it up. Her handwriting was still there on the sticky note. "Sign here, Mom." The little heart made something twist in my stomach, like a button on a dress that no longer fits. "This isn't transferring anything away from me, is it?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, gentle but just a little too quick. "Of course not. You're still on everything. Legally, it just looks cleaner this way. If anything happens to you, it helps avoid probate court. It's a precaution." "If anything happens to you." The phrase hung in the air like a draft through an open window. I looked down at the paper again. Legal terms I didn't fully understand. Quit claim, beneficiary designation, transfer on death deed. It was in English, but it didn't speak to me. "I just don't want to lose anything," I said. Lena placed her hand over mine like she had so many times since Cody passed. "You won't, I promise. Mom, I would never let that happen." I searched her face for a flicker of the little girl who once made get-well cards for her father with construction paper and glitter glue, but all I saw was a woman in control, precise, like she was running a meeting, not helping her mother. Why does she sound more like Cody's accountant than his daughter? That thought came unbidden, unwanted, but it stayed. I glanced toward the window. The plum tree Cody planted stood bare, its branches etched against the winter sky. He would have read every line on this page. Twice. But I wasn't him. I signed. One page, then another, and another. With each stroke of the pen, something shifted in me. A small undoing. Like I was packing away my authority, folding it into envelopes with prepaid postage. "That's it," Lena said cheerfully, gathering the documents. "You won't have to think about a thing now." She kissed my cheek and moved to her car without finishing her coffee. Later that evening, I sat at the same table, the indent of my signature still fresh in my mind. I thought about how she used to ask me for advice. On boys, at work, on whether or not to dye her hair dark. When had that stopped? When had I stopped being someone she needed and started being someone she managed? The house was silent again, like it always was after she left. But this time, the silence felt heavier, not like grief, like a door quietly locking behind me. The day I realized my name no longer opened my own bank account, access denied. I tried the backup code Cody had taped behind the desk drawer years ago. Still nothing. A low throb began behind my eyes. I clicked out of the browser, stood up too quickly. My knees complained. On the kitchen counter, an envelope waited. I opened it while the kettle boiled. Property tax delinquency notice. Balance due, $3,842.72. I turned the page over. The due date had passed a month ago. I blinked at the bold red letters like they were written in another language. The phone rang just then. I let it go to voicemail, insurance company. When I finally played the message, the voice was apologetic but clear. Due to inconsistencies in beneficiary verification, policy number 4768 has been temporarily suspended until proper documentation is submitted. Lena came that afternoon. She always let herself in. She placed a bag of groceries on the counter like nothing had changed, like I hadn't just discovered my name was being quietly erased. I didn't greet her. I just handed her the envelope. The tax bill came. My voice was low, controlled. She glanced at the paper, then started unpacking celery. Oh, that. Just a clerical delay. Happens with estate transitions. It's already handled. And the savings account? I paused. I tried to log in this morning. I changed the password. There were too many phishing attempts. She said it like she was doing me a favor. You shouldn't worry about those things anymore. I watched her arrange groceries in my fridge like she lived here. And the life insurance? She froze for a fraction of a second, then resumed moving. It's standard. They're just verifying signatures. These things take time. My voice hardened. You said everything was under control. It is, she said, not even looking at me now. Mom, I know this is a lot, but you asked me to take care of things. So I'm taking care of them. I stepped closer. Taking care of things doesn't mean locking me out of my own money, Lena. That made her turn around. You're not locked out. Her tone sharpened. You're protected. There's a difference. Protected. That word hit something raw inside me. Protected from what? From my own accounts? From reading a tax letter? I didn't say that. But I stared at her long enough for the silence to say it for me. She sighed, crossed her arms. You're grieving, Mom. You're not thinking clearly. Everything's a threat right now. But I promise, this is just procedure. There it was again. Grieving. She used it like a license. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I had no proof, only unease, like something rotting beneath the surface. When did you start thinking I couldn't handle my own life? I asked quietly. She looked at me like I was asking the wrong question. Maybe to her it wasn't about when. Maybe she'd always thought that way. It's not about what you can handle, she said. It's about what's efficient and safe and legal. That word, legal, hung in the air like smoke. I stared at her, same face I once kissed goodnight after every bad dream. Now, I'm using the law like a rope to tie my hands behind my back. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after she left. In front of me, the tax notice, the disconnected login page, the missed insurance call. Beside me, a shoebox filled with Cody's old files, still labeled in his blocky handwriting. I hadn't lost my mind. I was losing my place in my own life. And for the first time, I stopped feeling sad. I started feeling alert. Ben arrived on a Sunday. He never called first, just showed up with his flannel shirt half-buttoned, a box of donuts under one arm, and that same sleepy-eyed grin he'd had since childhood. He hugged me longer than usual. You look tired, Mom, he said, studying my face. I'm fine, I lied. I'd slept maybe 3 hours the night before. He followed me into the kitchen, plopped the donuts on the table, and poured us both coffee without asking. Cody used to do the same thing. For a few minutes, we just sat. He told me about a plumbing issue in his apartment, his coworker's new baby, a raccoon problem at the recycling center, all the small-town drama I didn't realize I missed. Then, just as I reached for a second donut, he asked it. Hey, whatever happened to Dad's savings certificates? I paused mid-bite. What do you mean? The ones he always talked about, Ben said. The CDs. He used to joke about cashing them in to buy a boat you'd never let him have. I blinked. The boat. That stupid imaginary boat Cody kept bringing up every summer. They were in the desk drawer, I said slowly, with the paperwork. But Lena's been handling all of that. Ben's face didn't change, but his fingers stilled on his mug. So you haven't seen them? No, I admitted, but I assumed she moved them with the other documents. She said everything's been digitized. That word again, digitized. As if my life were a file folder she could archive and forget. Ben leaned back in his chair. Would you mind if we logged in to check? Just for peace of mind. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure I could. Lena changed the passwords, I said quietly. Ben looked at me, really looked. And she didn't give you new ones? She said there were phishing scams, I replied, repeating the line like it still meant something. He nodded slowly, then stood. Mom, he said gently, I think we should sit down together and look through whatever you do have access to. There was no judgment in his voice, only concern, the kind that didn't hide behind smiles. I thought about how Lena had explained everything away with confidence, how her words wrapped around me like silk and barbed wire. And now here was Ben, awkward, open, sleeves rolled up and eyes soft, offering me the thing I hadn't realized I was starved for: clarity. The computer repair shop smelled of dust and solder. The young technician, a man barely older than my grandson, set the mud-stained hard drive on his desk with a doubtful look. "Not sure how much I can recover, ma'am. It's been exposed to the elements." I nodded, clutching my purse too tightly. "Just try." When the screen finally flickered to life, my throat went dry. Folder after folder appeared, each neatly labeled: insurance, titles, securities, savings. The boy clicked one open and my world tilted. Scanned documents, dozens of them. Each page bore my name in looping script, but my signature was warped, copied, and pasted onto forms I'd never seen. Quitclaim deeds, beneficiary changes, transfer of ownership certificates. Every line pointed in the same direction, away from me, toward Lena. I gripped the arm of the chair so hard my knuckles whitened. The technician glanced at me nervously. "You okay, ma'am?" I couldn't answer. My ears buzzed like I was standing too close to a train. And then, the worst of it. Emails. Letters scanned into PDFs, bank correspondence addressed to Lena. Transaction confirmed. Sale of securities executed. Funds deposited into designated account Cody Savings. The careful investments he used to check every Sunday afternoon while sipping his sweet tea. Gone. Sold off in pieces. Dismantled like furniture in a stranger's yard sale. The technician pulled another file open without realizing the knife he was twisting. A folder of images. Shredded papers lay flat against a scanner. I recognized the crest at the top of the page immediately. The insurance company. Policies Cody had kept in his desk, paid into for decades. Now in strips, cut cleanly by scissors. Something inside me broke then. Quietly, like glass under snow. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to steady the trembling. The air felt heavy, as if even the hum of the fluorescent lights carried weight. I thought of Lena at 12 years old, asking me to braid her hair before school. When had those small hands learned to cut, not to hold? I leaned forward, voice a rasp. "Can you print these?" The boy nodded uneasy. While the printer whirred, I stared at the grainy copy of my own forged signature and realized the truth Cody had never prepared me for. I hadn't just lost him. I was losing everything he left behind. And the thief wasn't a stranger. It was my daughter. The doorbell rang just as I was folding the last of the printed documents into a folder. I shoved it under the couch cushion, wiped my hands on my apron, and opened the door. Lena stood there with a grocery bag looped over her arm, smiling too brightly. "Mom, I brought soup. Thought you might want something warm." Her voice was cheerful, easy, like nothing had shifted, like she hadn't buried evidence in my yard at 4 a.m. I stepped aside without answering. She walked in as if she owned the place. At the kitchen table, she unpacked containers, chicken broth, fresh bread, and some fruit. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Any better sleep lately?" I watched her hands moving, precise, neat. Those same hands that had folded papers into neat little stacks, slid them into envelopes, pressed them across the table for me to sign. My voice came before I could stop it. "What have you taken from me, Lena?" Her fingers froze on the bread knife. For a beat, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She looked up at me, eyes wide but not shocked. More like she was calculating. Then, a smile. Small. Polished. "Mom, let's not talk about heavy things right now. Eat first." She slid the bread across the table toward me. I didn't touch it. "Answer me. What have you taken?" My heart was hammering, but my voice was steady. Cody used to say my calmest tone was the most dangerous. Lena's jaw tightened, just a flicker. Then she exhaled through her nose and leaned back in her chair. "You're exhausted, Mom. You're imagining problems where there aren't any. I came here to check on you, not to be interrogated." Inside, I felt the old reflex rise, the urge to apologize, to retreat, to tell her she was right. But then I remembered the hard drive, the forged signatures, the shredded policies. Imagining problems? Number I had seen them. Still, I stayed quiet, let her words hang in the air. She pushed the soup toward me. "You need to eat. That's what matters." I stared at her, and for the first time I realized every kindness now felt like a transaction. Every smile is a mask. She wasn't my caretaker. She was my thief in plain sight. It was Ben's idea. And Carol's. Carol had been my friend for 30 years, a retired social worker who now volunteered at the senior center. She knew things I didn't. Words like durable power of attorney, beneficiary designation, revocable trust. Words that sounded like walls being built around me while I slept. Together, they drove me to an office in town. A brass plaque by the door read, Ellen Marsh, attorney at law, elder law and estates. Ellen was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes that didn't soften just because mine were wet. She listened quietly as I laid out the story, my voice cracking when I mentioned the plum tree, the buried hard drive. When I finished, she folded her hands. Mrs. Parker, she said firmly, what your daughter has done isn't just hurtful. It's potentially criminal. I blinked at her. Criminal? Yes. Under state law, what you've described falls into elder financial exploitation. She's taken control of your accounts, altered beneficiary designations, and may have forged your signature. That's fraud, forgery, and possibly embezzlement, depending on the amounts. Ben shifted beside me. But she had Mom sign papers. Real signatures. Doesn't that make it legal? Ellen shook her head. Not necessarily. If she misrepresented what those documents meant or concealed their effect, that's undue influence. Courts take that seriously, especially when one party is grieving and vulnerable. I felt my pulse in my throat. So I'm not crazy. Ellen's gaze softened, but only a little. No, you're not. And legally, you're still listed as joint owner of the property with full survivorship rights, which means when your husband passed, everything transferred to you automatically. Lena can't undo that with forged documents. My breath caught. The cabin, the land, still mine. I hadn't realized until then how much I needed to hear those two words. Still mine. Ellen continued. What we need is evidence. Everything you can find. Originals, scans, emails, even that hard drive. If she altered documents or shredded originals, that's proof of intent. Keep it safe. Don't confront her again until we're ready. Carol leaned forward. We'll help. She shouldn't do this alone. I looked at Ben. His jaw was tight, eyes fierce in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy protecting his little sister on the playground. And for the first time since Cody died, I didn't feel helpless. My voice, when it came, was steadier. I'll find everything. Every last piece she tried to bury. She took my husband from me once. I won't let her take what's left of him. That night, back at the cabin, I laid the folder on the table. My hands no longer trembled, my eyes no longer blurred. For months, I had signed my name like a sleepwalker. Now, each page was an artifact of my awakening. I wasn't the victim. Anymore, I was the witness. The knock came just after dusk. I opened the door to find Lena again, smiling, her arms full of folders instead of groceries this time. Mom, she said brightly, stepping inside without waiting. I've brought the updated paperwork. We just need your signature to clear things up once and for all. She laid the folders on the kitchen table where Cody once dealt his Sunday crosswords. Her fingers smoothed the edges, neat, controlled, almost tender. I stayed standing. More papers? My voice was even. Just routine, she assured me, pulling out a chair. A few corrections, really. The bank requires your confirmation, and the insurance company won't process claims without your consent. It's all to protect you, Mom. Nothing more. Protect me. Again that word. I sat slowly, hands folded in my lap. You've said that before. Lena's smile held. And I meant it before. You don't need the stress. Let me do the worrying. You just sign, and I'll take care of the rest. Inside, my chest tightened. How many times had I let those words lull me? How many times had I traded questions for comfort? But I didn't let it show. And what happens if I don't sign? That made her pause for just a breath. Then she leaned forward, voice softer, almost coaxing. Why wouldn't you, Mom? This is just a formality. Honestly, you're overthinking. Dad would have wanted things smooth without delays. Dad would have read every line, twice. I kept that thought to myself. She slid the first page toward me, pen laid gently on top. It's the same as before, just initials here and a signature at the bottom. Then you can relax. I looked at the papers, at the neat columns of words I no longer trusted, and for the first time, instead of reaching for the pen, I lifted my eyes and locked onto hers. Relax, I repeated quietly. That's what you think this is about. I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I reached under the couch cushion and laid a folder on the table. The paper edges caught the dim light as I slid it toward her. Before I sign anything, I said softly, maybe you should look at these. Lena frowned, confused at first. Then she opened the folder, her face drained. Bank letters, insurance policies, shredded and pieced together, PDFs from the hard drive, printed crisp and undeniable. Each one was a wound she couldn't bandage. Mom! Her voice cracked, but she recovered fast. Where did you get these? You buried them, I replied. My tone was calm, but it sliced sharper than shouting. I dug them up. She pushed the folder closed too quickly, like that could erase what she'd seen. This isn't what you think. These documents, they're drafts, mistakes. Nothing official. Drafts don't shred originals, I said. For the first time, her composure slipped. Her smile was gone, her jaw tight. You don't understand how complicated this is, she snapped. I've been handling things for you because you can't. You should be grateful. Her voice rose, bouncing off the kitchen walls. Do you know how exhausting it is to fix everything after Dad? To make sure you don't lose the house, the insurance, the investments? You think you could manage that alone? I let her words hang in the air. Then I pushed one last paper forward, the formal complaint stamped and signed. I don't have to manage it alone, I said, because I've already spoken to a lawyer and the state. They call it elder financial exploitation. That's what this is, Lena. For a heartbeat, silence. Then she erupted. How dare you? Her hand slammed against the table, rattling the soup bowl she'd brought. After everything I've done, you betray me like this? Your own daughter? Do you have any idea what people will think? What this will do to me? Her voice cracked into a scream and the mask shattered completely. I didn't raise mine. This isn't about what people will think of you, I answered, steady as stone. It's about what you already did to me. The kitchen felt smaller now, walls closing in with the echo of her scream. Lena's chest rose and fell fast, her face flushed, eyes wet but furious. I didn't flinch. I only pushed the folder closer until it touched her wrist. Look at it again, I said quietly. Not as a daughter trying to hide. Look at it as evidence, because that's what it is now. She sank back into the chair, lips trembling, words stumbling out like broken glass. I just wanted to make things easier. You don't understand, Mom. Without me, you'd have lost everything already. I held it together. I kept it safe. Safe. The word hit like poison. I leaned forward. Safe for who? For me? Or for you? Her mouth opened, then shut again. Silence stretched between us, thick as winter fog. For the first time, Lena looked small. Not the composed professional, not the calculating manipulator. Just a daughter cornered by the truth. I steadied my voice. You didn't just take money, Lena. You took trust, your father's and mine. That's something you can't bury. Not with hard drives, not with shredded paper. Her eyes darted toward the door, as if escape might undo the moment. But I didn't let her leave with the last word. I've already lost my husband. I won't lose myself too. I straightened in my chair, the words coming from a place deeper than anger. You taught me something, even in betrayal. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I'm done surrendering. She said nothing more, just gathered her folders with shaky hands, paper edges crumpling under her grip. When the door closed behind her, the house was quiet again, but not the hollow quiet of grief. The silence was full, steady. Like a breath I'd been holding for too long, I finally released it. I sat at the table, the complaint form still lying open, my name signed clear and strong across the bottom. For months, my eyes had blurred over every document. Now, each letter was sharp, and in that sharpness, I found myself again. Money can be stolen, papers can be forged, but clarity, your voice, your will, once reclaimed, no one can take away. The courthouse wasn't far, just 3 blocks from Ellen's office. Ben drove me there that morning, the folder heavy on my lap. I kept pressing my hand over it as if the papers might slip away if I didn't. We climbed the courthouse steps together. I could hear Ben's boots on the stone, solid and reassuring. My own steps were slower, but they didn't falter. Inside, we passed the security checkpoint, then down a long hallway that smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. The clerk's window was at the end. Name? The woman asked without looking up. Margaret Parker? My voice didn't shake. I slid the folder through the slot. She flipped through the complaint pages, the exhibits attached, bank statements, forged forms, the printed scans from the hard drive. She stamped it once, twice. The sound was final, like a gavel. Filed. You'll receive a case number in the mail. Next step, the court will review and notify the respondent. The respondent, my daughter. Back home, the consequences came faster than I expected. The first letter arrived 2 days later. Notice of revocation of power of attorney. The second, from the bank. Effective immediately, all third-party access to accounts, ending in 3271, has been suspended pending court determination. Lena's name was gone from the login page. When Ben and I signed in together for the first time in months, the balance glowed back at me, under my name alone. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but relief so sharp it hurt. That evening I sat at the kitchen table, the plum tree visible through the window. The same table where Lena once slid papers across for me to sign. Now it was my turn. Ellen had sent over the formal affidavit, my sworn statement. At the bottom was a line waiting for my signature. I picked up the pen and rolled it once between my fingers. 8 months ago, I had signed blindly, grieving, not even reading. Now I read every word, slowly, thoroughly. And then I signed. The sound of the pen against a paper was louder than it should have been, like the house itself was listening. When I set the pen down, I placed both hands flat on the page. My palms were warm, steady. This time, the name at the bottom was mine. Only mine. The phone rang. Ellen's number lit up. Mrs. Parker? It's done, I told her. The complaint's filed. The accounts are back in my name. She doesn't have access anymore. There was a pause, then her measured reply. Good. That means you've taken the hardest step. From here, the court will handle the rest. What you did today wasn't just about money, Margaret. It was about reclaiming who you are. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet. Not the hollow quiet of loss. A quiet full of breath, of presence. Through the window, the plum tree stood against the dusk sky. Its branches were bare now, but spring was never far. I whispered into the stillness, almost to Cody. I found my voice again. Even in grief, even in betrayal, it is never too late to take back your name. Trust may be broken, but dignity, once reclaimed, cannot be stolen again. The backyard had become a battlefield. The ground still bore the hollow scar where Lena had dug that night, the same soil where I unearthed the truth. Dead leaves clung stubbornly to the corners of the fence, and the once proud plum tree was gone, cut down to a stump that leaned like a broken limb. For weeks I had avoided looking at it, but not today. Today I carried life back into the space Cody once cherished. A young plum sapling, no taller than my shoulder, cradled in my arms. Its roots wrapped in burlap, damp with promise. Ben met me by the garden shed, shovel already in hand. He looked like he'd been waiting for me. You sure about this? He asked, eyes flicking toward the bare spot where the old tree had been. I nodded, setting the sapling down carefully. That tree grew with us, with me and your father. It saw everything we built, and it saw how I almost lost it all. I placed a hand over my chest. But this one will stand for what I took back. We worked side by side, just as Cody and I had years ago. Ben drove the shovel into the soil, each thrust breaking the earth with a thud that echoed in the cold air. My knees ached as I knelt beside him, clearing rocks, brushing dirt away with my gloves. When the hole was deep enough, we lowered the sapling in together. For a moment, our hands touched over the roots. Ben looked at me quietly. You know, Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Strong? Number, I was stubborn, and sometimes too trusting. My smile faded. But trust without boundaries isn't strength. It's surrender. I had to learn that the hard way. We covered the roots with soil, layer after layer. With each handful, I felt like I was burying more than dirt. I was burying Lena's lies. The forged papers, the silence I'd lived in too long, and what grew in their place was mine again. Ben pressed the soil firmly with his boot, then leaned on the shovel. Dad would have liked this, planting something new. I brushed the dirt from my gloves, staring at the sapling swaying in the sharp wind. Your father taught me to nurture what matters, Ben, to never let storms take everything. My voice caught but steadied. This tree isn't just about him. It's about us. About me standing again. The wind picked up cold against my skin. I pulled off the gloves, letting them drop to the ground. My silver hair whipped around my face, but my eyes stayed open, unblinking against the sting. I stood tall in the garden, between the past buried in the soil and the future rooted in the sapling. For the first time, the quiet wasn't heavy. It was full. A week later, I found myself sitting in a church basement, not for a service, but for a meeting. Folding chairs lined the room, a table of stale cookies and coffee at the back. Around me sat a dozen faces, most of them lined with the same kind of years that weighed on mine. A sign taped to the door had read, "Senior Support Circle, Financial Safety Workshop." I wasn't sure why I came. Carol had suggested it, and Ben had offered to drive. Part of me still felt raw, as though speaking the truth too loudly might tear it open again. But when the group leader invited introductions, something in me rose. I cleared my throat. My name is Margaret Parker. A few months ago, I thought I had lost everything my husband left behind. Not because of strangers, because of someone I trusted most. Heads lifted, eyes met mine. I swallowed hard, then continued. I signed papers I didn't understand. I let grief blind me, and I almost lost my home, my savings, my future, but I didn't lose my voice. Not forever. I found it again, and I used it. The room was silent for a moment. Then one woman whispered, "Me too." Another nodded, eyes wet. I realized then that my story wasn't just mine. It was theirs too. Afterward, Ben waited by the door. His broad frame filled the doorway, protective as always. "You did good, Mom," he said softly. I smiled. "I only told the truth." "Sometimes," he replied. "That's the hardest thing." That night back home, I stepped once more into the backyard. The sapling stood where we'd planted it, thin branches swaying in the winter wind. I pressed my palm gently to its trunk, rough bark beneath my hand. "You'll grow strong," I whispered. "And so will I." The cold gust tugged at my hair, silver strands catching the light of the porch lamp. I let the wind have its way, let it carry everything I had buried. Silence, fear, surrender. All that remained was a steady gaze, clear as glass, looking forward. So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe to the channel for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.